Javed, I'll start with the ceasefire negotiations that were underway in Qatar. Now, the Hamas delegation says that if the starvation crisis is ongoing in the occupied Gaza Strip, then there's no point in continuing these negotiations. Now, the Israeli side has a unique proposal. Hamas has its own proposal. Why have these negotiations stalled?
I think these negotiations on the behalf of Israel were essentially meant to go for some kind of a ceasefire just for 60 days, which means that there could have been a lease of life for 60 days only for the Palestinians, and then there would be resumption of genocide. That is just a punchline. And without any guarantees to withdraw from Gaza, at least from parts of Gaza, and particularly from the borders between Egypt and Gaza. Now, I think, and then there was also a very false impression, which Israel has been trying to give, that with the ceasefire negotiations, there is a possibility of a ceasefire, and hence there would be resumption of aid to the starving population. Now, I think since these negotiations were going nowhere, and these negotiations were only meant to secure the release of the prisoners of war from the custody of Hamas, and then resume genocidal campaign, I think it looks like that Hamas, this particular decision, is a very strategic, and it is also very tactical. It has both short-term gains, and I hope it will have some kind of also long-term gains. Short-term in the sense that false impression that there would be a ceasefire and there would be a resumption of the aid to the Palestinian population. That false impression was again, in a manner, was projected where Israel came under a lot of pressure. And that is why now they had to give some kind of so-called pause in the military operation, allowing some trucks of the food through UN to enter into Gaza. I think that is, in terms of something, is better than nothing, because the starving population need the food very badly. And more importantly, I think Israel is not abandoning its long-term objectives, which are, everybody knows, basically to expel all these Palestinians from Gaza by creating unlivable conditions, which they have already successfully created. What we are seeing on the ground with the few trucks of aid going into Gaza is just as some food for the Palestinian population before they are killed by the airstrikes.
Javed, what's extremely distressing is the fact that Israel has been criticizing the United Nations, saying that they have not been able to deliver the aid that's required, in the occupied Gaza Strip. So what do you make of these statements when the Israeli Foreign Ministry, when the Israeli government, when Israeli cabinet members are criticizing the United Nations and saying that the United Nations should make no excuses while delivering aid? So they haven't allowed the United Nations to deliver aid in the first place.
But that's a sheer stinky propaganda by Israel. Everybody knows. This makes no sense when Israel says that the UN agencies are in league with the Hamas. Does it make sense? This is just an excuse. Then supposedly if that is the case, why the Israeli military have been burning the trucks of foods? Because they don't want population to stay there, create unlivable conditions, to starve them to the death. Now, the third leading reason for the death of the Palestinian is starvation. From March 2nd till now, there has been a very little aid. And this so-called Gaza Foundation, I would call it, and many other people call it, Gaza Holocaust Foundation, it has been delivering so-called aid in return of 1,000 people who have been killed. Thousands others have been injured. So again, there is a very obvious method in the madness. And look at what Israeli other far-right ministers have been saying. They are saying it that we don't want the Palestinian population in Gaza. We want to expel them at every cost. So again, their geostrategic religious agenda of Israel's expansion is now in the public domain. They've been propagating it, but then their so-called Sahar spokesperson, their foreign ministry, Israeli foreign ministries, they are trying to project a kind of image which doesn't make sense, and only they are ridiculing themselves when they say that this Hamas is stealing this food, when they are saying that the UN agencies are not delivering this food. You talk to the Palestinian people in Gaza and also elsewhere in the Middle East, they will tell you that the UN agencies have turned out to be very effective. They know Palestinian needs. They have already developed mechanism over the period of time where that food delivery is ensured. So I think this essentially Israel has used now many tactics. Propaganda has already been failed. Their Holocaust Foundation turned out to be a death traps, and it has been condemned internationally. And now there looks like some Israel is feeling some heat of international pressure. The reason it looks like that, I think within the USA there is no greater debate that why the US Congressman, why the US President is being blackmailed. What is it all about in Epstein file? This Jeffrey Epstein, who apparently committed suicide in jail, the man who actually blackmailed the US politicians through underage girls, and everybody knows that the US President Donald Trump, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, he was one of the frequent visitors. And even his last wife was also Epstein's girl. And that speaks volume what has been happening. Now the debate in the USA is that the Mossad, the Israel's notorious intelligence agency, have blackmailed US politicians, including President Donald Trump, through blackmailing tactics, and Jeffrey Epstein was working for Mossad. And that is why we have seen that despite public commitment, US President now is refusing to make public these Epstein files because it also carries his name.
Javed, a similar reaction we've seen in Europe as well, because in the last few days we saw the statement coming from Emmanuel Macron, the French president, that France will recognize the state of Palestine. But when you look at other countries, for example, Germany and the United Kingdom, they have not explicitly criticized Israel. We've seen Spain do the same. We've seen Norway and Ireland do the same as well. They have recognized the state of Palestine. But do you think that Israel has taken advantage of the Europeans and it has dismantled Europe's foundational values?
I think it has ruined the European values. By the way, I don't believe that the Europeans have universal values. Their values of the freedom of expression, their values of the freedom of association, let's say the Western values, both in case of USA, I think those values are restricted only to their own people. When it comes to the Muslim countries and other third world countries, they have discriminated them. They have been in league with the military dictators over the period of the time, both in case of Turkey in the past, both in case of Pakistan and other third world countries. They have been least bothered about the democracies. So again, what has happened during last 2 years, that Israel, in a very comprehensive manner, basically tarnished the image of the West, that it had some semblance of carrying the human values, because the international order has been destroyed. It is under the rubbles of the demolition sites in Gaza. And I don't think that Europeans have any values left now. International order has been destroyed to the extent that now people talk about China. China is rising even militarily, not just economically. Russia has given tough time to the USA. Russia doesn't listen to the Donald Trump. Why? Because Russia knows that US cannot do it. Russia is not dictating its agenda to the Europe, to the USA. And in a similar fashion, in economic terms, China is dictating its political agenda and economic agenda to the West. Again, in that broader picture, what is the reason? Reason is apartheid Israel, which enjoys complete support from the West, both from Europe, both from the USA. That is a core reason. There has been no international genuine, meaningful reaction against Israel. There were two initial judgments from International Criminal Court, from ICJ. Those were not implemented. Rather, the prosecutors and the judges were sanctioned by the USA. That is the reason that now the international order stands destroyed. All these blocs in the world, they are pursuing their own political agenda, and they are not specifically pursuing the so-called international order in a manner they used to be. US has lost its prestige. US has lost its political influence. US has lost its geostrategic influence. US has lost its economic clout also, partly also because of the, I would call it, stupidities of the President Donald Trump.
Javed, finally, I just want to, touch upon the situation that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is embroiled in. Like you were mentioning, he has ICC arrest warrants. There are public protests at home. His coalition is collapsing as well. And most importantly, he has no idea what to do with the Palestinians. Now, why is he prolonging this war, Javed?
I think it's a long-held view by everybody, by every analyst, that there are domestic reasons. I think that is a micro picture. Domestic reasons are that politically he has been facing tough time, particularly from 2019, when he was indicted on corruption charges, and that now trial has been resumed. And because of internal political dynamics, he's been facing tough time. He could be possibly disqualified. That is a problematic area. Now, again, but the two other extremist, expansionist political parties have withdrawn their support because they want to make it sure that there is no ceasefire agreement on the terms and conditions of Hamas. And at the same time, they have said that they would not support any no-confidence motion against Prime Minister Netanyahu. That means there is a method in the madness. It looks like that there is some kind of a discrete arrangement, political arrangement behind the scene between more extremist terrorist political parties who are coalition partners with the Netanyahu and Netanyahu himself, whereby I think they would prolong this government. This government of Netanyahu is going to last maybe for at least for 3 months, because Israel's parliament is on a vacation for 3 months. So it means there would not be any no confidence motion against the Israel's prime minister. So in that broader context, I don't think that there is any genuine, meaningful opposition to Israel's prime minister at home. Only an isolated group of people who have their loved ones in custody of Hamas, they are concerned. So far as the larger population of Israel is concerned, they have been radicalized, they have been brainwashed over the period of time where they've been told that Arabs are your enemies, Muslims are your enemies, Palestinians are particularly subhuman being, killing them is a justified, even their killing of their babies, their children, their women, their old men, young men, that is a justified. They've been teaching them, citing misleading references of the Holy Bible.
Javed Rana, thank you for that analysis. It was a pleasure having you on the program.
The growing tide of anti-Israel sentiments. What you see behind me is just tip of the iceberg of what is happening in the country. More than half of $52 billion black CIA budget is spent on espionage network in Pakistan. How would you handle it?
The US has looked upon Pakistan as an ally at one point and then as an enemy at the same time.
That is going to be the first legal reason on the basis of which he is going to be instantly ousted by the Supreme Court of Pakistan.
Joining us live, Javed Rana, who's an expert on politics and geostrategic issues.
In the world politics, which is not being driven by any moral principle, it is being driven by the hard geostrategic realities. In a broader picture, more countries would aspire to have nuclear weapons.